Already found out how's Bill doing.
Oh, you know,
His
I
daughter was
called
taking
and
care
talked
of
to
him.
his daughter.
Yeah.
I forget where he is.
Well, he's in a extended care
I always put them through first.
Good, thank you.
card.
Information or,
Yeah, or something. Yeah, yeah.
But we've been so involved in all this other
Yeah.
stuff.
Great.
His daughter, I called her. Hopefully we could bring this up, probably not tonight.
Good evening. This is the Environmental Quality Control Board for the City of Seal Beach. Our meeting begins now, just after 6 o'clock. With that, I will ask that staff handle the roll call at this time.
Thank you. My name is Greg Hastings. I'm the Community Development Director. And the roll call, Barbara Barton.
Here?
John Vento.
Here.
Mario Voce.
Here.
Marla Smolowitz.
Here.
And Roger Bennett.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I could
Yes.
real quickly just mention that tonight's proceedings are going to be recorded audibly. So we would have to have everyone who is speaking please identify themselves before speaking so that we have the information on the record.
Absolutely, thank you. With that, we can go ahead and approve the agenda. First of all, on my agenda item here, I have the approval of the agenda, but there's no public comments except at the end. What I'd like to do is rearrange this agenda to put the public comments after the approval of the agenda. That's public comments on this final environmental impact report. And then the board will handle the agenda items after the public has their chance with their say-so on this final environmental impact report.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Greg Hastings, one more time. The intent of having the public comments down there is actually for items that aren't associated with the DWP EIR for anybody to speak, but as you mentioned, that is correct, that you would have speakers speak during the agenda items portion. But anyone who is not speaking relative to the DWP EIR has the opportunity at the end of the meeting under public comments to speak.
On off-agenda items at the
Correct.
end. Okay, thank you.
Correct. And also, I just want to mention we do have our consultants here tonight, RBF, who will be making a presentation.
Okay.
And we would like to ask that the board try to focus on the recommendations of the City Council on the adequacy of the environmental document that's before you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, with that, I'll call for a motion for the approval of the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Yeah, I would move that we, first of all, we, for the record, correct the agenda date from the 16th to the 25th.
Thank you.
So noted. Okay. And then with that, I move that it be approved as submitted.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Barbara Barton. Do you need that name every time I talk?
Please, if you would, please. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Thank you. I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that carries. Now we're on the agenda item. Formulation of recommendation to the City Council on whether the DWP specific plan final environmental impact report has been prepared in accordance with SEQA guidelines and whether it should be certified. Okay, with that, I would like to start with staff. There's a presentation from the consultants regarding the final environmental impact report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our consultant here is here, RBF, and he'll be presenting a PowerPoint tonight.
Good evening, members of the committee. Eddie Torres with RBF Consulting. I'm here to do a presentation about the DWP Specific Plan Amendment, EIR. The project location is a 10.9 acre site, which is located at the southwest corner of Marina Drive and 1st Street as depicted on the above map. The project consists of a residential development, 48 residential lots with 4.5 acres, 6.4 acres of open space and parkland. The actions approvals required for the project include a general plan amendment, specific plan amendment, zone changes, tentative tract map, CC&Rs, lot line adjustment, CEQA review, site plan review, public street vacation, a grading permit, encroachment permit, and a coastal development permit. This is the tentative tract map that's proposed with the 48 lot residential and the open space area. The purpose of the EIR is to disclose information to the public and decision makers and review the existing conditions, analyze the environmental impacts associated with the project, and suggest feasible mitigation measures to reduce project impacts, and analyze a range of feasible alternatives. The analysis in the draft EIR included a review of land use and relevant planning, aesthetics, light and glare, biological and cultural resources, traffic and circulation, air quality and greenhouse gases, noise, geology and soils, hazards and hazardous materials, hydrology and water quality, population and housing, and public services and utilities. I'll provide an overview of the conclusions of the draft EIR. Impacts concluded to be less than significant with no mitigation include land use and relevant planning, greenhouse gas emissions, and population and housing. Those less than significant with mitigation are biological and cultural resources, traffic and circulation, air quality and noise, geology and soils, hazards and hazardous materials, hydrology and water quality, and public services and utilities. Unavoidable impacts are determined to occur for aesthetics, light and glare, based upon impacts to long-term visual character and quality, and light and glare. The EIR analyzed a range of alternatives as required by CEQA, which included the no project, no build alternative, the no project 1996 DWP specific plan, and a modified layout alternative as depicted below. The analysis determined that the alternative site layout as depicted on this slide would be the environmentally superior alternative, as it would reduce the significant unavoidable impacts related to visual character and quality and light and glare. I'll provide a general overview of some of the environmental comments that were received during public review. It should be noted that the final EIR, which consisted of a response to comments, included responses to every comment on the comment letters that were received during the public review period. On traffic, there was a concern related to the need to include the PCH and 2nd Street intersection, and it should be noted that the project did include an analysis of this intersection and showed that during the PM peak hour, at most 20 southbound and 20 northbound project-related vehicles would be traveling to this intersection. It should be noted that the PCH and 2nd Street development project, which was also included into our cumulative impact analysis, was not approved by the Long Beach City Council. The next was a need to show traffic impacts along Ocean Avenue, and based upon the trip and circulation patterns associated with the project, there would be no traffic going on to Ocean Avenue. Timing of the traffic counts, there was a question related to when were the traffic counts conducted. And based upon industry standards, the traffic counts were conducted during the peak hours, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on July 28, 2010. The next was regarding narrowing of 1st Street. And it should be noted that pre and post project, the level of service at this intersection of 1st and Marina would be a level of service A, and it should be noted that the city engineer took a look at the reconfiguration of this and determined that there would be no significant impacts. Hazardous materials, there was concern about underground structures on site, and as noted in the EIR and in the appendices, there are two 2,500 barrel concrete structure tanks located on site. The tops were taken off, the fluids and residuals were drained and disposed of off-site, and the sides and bottoms were disposed of and crushed on-site for fill. There were no hazardous materials determined to be present underneath the bottom of the tanks. Residual asbestos concerns. It should be noted that multiple Phase 2 assessments were conducted by firms such as Parsons, Tetra Tech, and Dudek. All of these determined that there would be no significant impacts above DTSC and EPA standards. It should be noted that the site was also reviewed by the Orange County Health Care Agency, and they determined that no significant impacts would result. The Phase 2 assessments and EIR were provided to the DTSC, and they provided recommendations that the analysis suited the appropriate regulatory standards, and they concluded no significant impacts in this regard. The next was a concern about fireplaces. It should be noted that the AQMD has Rule 445, which prohibits wood-burning fireplaces in new developments. This is enforced by the South Coast AQMD, and violations will be subject to a fine until the action is corrected. Also, there was a concern related to the enforcement of air quality mitigation measures. In the final EIR, there's a mitigation monitoring program, which has multiple columns, the first column being the mitigation measure, the second being who's responsible for implementing the mitigation measure, and then who's responsible for verifying the mitigation measure. And the enforcement of the mitigation measures for air quality would be related to the city building official and city engineer. Also, complaints could be lodged by residents to the South Coast AQMD by calling 1-800-CUT-SMOG. Biological resources, concerns related to migratory birds. And based upon the biological surveys that were conducted on site, the site conditions did not allow for nesting opportunities. They allowed for primarily foraging opportunities for feeding. The EIR also contained a mitigation measure, Bio-1. Bio-1, in addition to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, requires that vegetation and grading activities take place outside of the nesting season. Should grading or vegetation activities take place during the nesting season, a 100 to 300 foot buffer would have to occur around that nest, and it also be monitored by a biological consultant. Public services and utilities, there was a concern about fire and emergency access concerns. The site plan and EIR were provided to the Orange County Fire Authority. The Fire Authority provided recommendations for site design. Those mitigation measures are included in mitigation measure PSU-1. With implementation of PSU-1, the OCFA determined there would be no significant impacts in relation to fire and emergency access concerns. Finally, hydrology and water quality concerns related to stormwater runoff and flooding concerns at First Street and Marina Drive. It should be noted that the flooding issues primarily occurred during the low tide and high tide conditions and not from runoff on adjacent properties. There's also mitigation measures in the document, primarily in relationship to mitigation measure HWQ-6, which requires an analysis of a 100-year storm event and an engineering design to prevent any significant flooding impacts during this condition. Such study would be conducted and be approved by the city engineer. The status of the EIR process, public review ran from November 14th to January 9th. A final EIR was posted on the city's website on April 2nd and transmitted to the commenting agencies and was available at the City Hall. It included responses to all comment letters, 26 letters in total, as well as comments received during the public hearings with the EQCB Committee, the DWP Committee, and the Archaeological Committee. It should be noted that there were no revisions necessary to the EIR based upon the public comments. The only errata or changes necessary were to delete references to the redevelopment plan amendment. And finally, the following hearings will be held. There will be a planning commission on May 2nd and city council meetings on June 11th and June 25th. And that concludes our presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, does staff have any additional comments or presentations to make in addition to the consultant?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, with that, I will go ahead and open up the docket for comments from the public, if you have any. And this is on the final environmental impact report.
Thank you. We'll take it easy. Thank you.
Okay.
Jim Caviola, Silvy's resident. I dropped off to you 2 packets. I didn't make enough copies of the second packet. I apologize. If you could share them. The first one that everyone has is a little synopsis of just a few documents from a very large amount of documents, probably about 600 documents that I've gotten from the county records. We have an August 23, 2000 City Attorney of Los Angeles letter, and this is to the representative of the purchasers, Bay City Partners, and it says right on there, this property is purchased as is. Now, the second document, it comes from part of the Phase 2 report, and it refers to remediation. A Phase 2 report is done because a Phase 1 report showed there was a problem, and I've underlined where it talks about the asbestos and the hydrocarbon soil contamination. And the site assessment by Parsons Engineering, done in 2000. Next page will be the February 2000 front cover page of that document. And at the bottom of that next page it says it matters as to the ultimate land use. It says, however, a large amount of clean fill will likely be needed if there is a significant potential for subsurface disturbance, i.e. residential or a playground goes there. So that is not covered and ignored completely in this new, I call the cartoon book, because this is a Phase 2 from Parsons in 2000. They refer to a letter in 1987, which I've gotten a certificate of non-record for the Orange County Health Department. There are no records there, okay? And I had to go through a lot of trouble to get them to sign a letter saying there's no records. I spent a lot of time trying to do that. Now, if you look at the next page, it looks at the bottom, it says residual asbestos is present in localized areas, sites, soils, levels that could pose an adverse effect to human health under certain type of land use, and it refers to land use with a low potential for future dust generation, i.e. commercial or concrete or asphalt cover. Now, that's not what you're looking at here. They don't talk about this. I don't know why. Now, the next 2 pages are very interesting to me. They're the actual sale of the property. It's a transcript by the Department of Water and Power, a gentleman named Mr. Caruso, who's, I guess, a big shot in L.A. and selling off this public land. The first speaker was from the Nature Conservancy. And if you read this, it's quite irritating. This Mr. Caruso shut the Nature Conservancy right down, summarily. And then, during this, some unknown speaker is talking about, oh, there's been a higher bid, and they sell it right there. I mean, it's very annoying as a public member of the public selling public land and summarily blowing off a guy from the Nature Conservancy who says that he was told it wasn't for sale. And this Mr. Caruso just treats him just unbelievable. Now, the next document that I didn't make enough copies for, and I apologize, is another document that annoys me, because this document is from our specific plan. And I've heard from our own attorney that the language doesn't match the map and we have a problem. Well, all maps are only boundary line maps. This is a specific plan, and we have in this specific plan a legend. All maps have legends. And it shows right down there, I circled it. The dotted area is where the physical hotel goes, and the lines and dots is where the boundary is for this project. That's there. There's nothing confusing about it. It's a legend. And if you look at the next page, it's the legend from the EIR, this current EIR. They have a legend, and they show Area 4 as open space. That happens to be the river. So I would like to know, is that an acre that they're giving us, a 6.4? It's really 5.4, because an acre of this land is underwater. I might be off, maybe it's 3/4 of an acre. So that's pretty arrogant to be putting up here, and for the newspaper to be reporting that we're getting 6.4 instead of the 7 acres and the 3 acres that are supposed to be developed. Now it's 6.4, but by the way, you can see right there that that is underwater, okay? And look how big they've made the area compared to the legend from the specific plan. That's an acre and a half giveaway. If you look at the next document, it shows the tentative track map. It says to develop 4.5 acres. All right? So this is simple stuff. Now, if you look at the next map after that, that's their layout. Their layout goes up past Central Way. It's 4.5 acres. So somewhere along the lines here, we went from 10 acres, 7 acres open space, 3 acres developed, to 4.5 acres developed, and an acre underwater. Will someone explain why we have an acre underwater? They can't give us, that's controlled by the federal government, the ocean and the rivers. I'm asking you to say this EIR is insufficient. The documents I showed you, there has been no remediation over there since 2000, and it's clear in this Phase 2 report from the City of LA that it is still polluted, and those crushed tanks only were talked about for the first time at the last hearing. I was the one that came up with those documents that proved that those tanks were crushed in place. So, and also they never commented by the fact that there was a drill bit refusal at 3 feet. The bits that were refused. I had to take that to an engineer and have them read that, because as you know, when you look at these things, you can't read those. But the bit gets refused. That means it gets stuck on concrete. So there you go. I'm asking for you to please vote this down. It's completely, it's a scam, and it's a sham, and it's really disappointing to think that we're sitting here talking about land underwater. You know? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Charles Antos. I want to read something into the record. This is a email that my wife received from Greg Mossholder. Greg Mossholder was a student locally, and he took thousands of pictures of the demolition of the power plant. DWP power plant. And then afterwards, the people from the DWP gave him literally boxes of photographs from the construction of the power plant all the way through, and everything that they had, because obviously it was torn down. I have read the part of the EIR pertaining to the soil and water samples. The survey passed muster according to all of the environmental laws of the state of California. What bothers me is that the soil samples were only taken 0.25 to 1.5 feet below ground surface. The big question is what lies below the sample levels. When foundations and utilities are put in and holes dug to plant trees, etc., what might be turned up that could be detrimental to human health? I don't know if the sample levels are all that are required by California law. The report stated that the remaining structures, i.e. foundations, were removed in 1986. One would have to contact the company that did this work to see what was actually done if all of the foundations were removed, or the area where housing is planned was the site of one of the few oil tanks and was downwind of the asbestos that I saw blowing out of the steam plant as it was being demolished. I recommend that core samples be taken and analyzed in the proposed housing area down to at least 10 feet to be safe. Since I am not an engineer, my suggestions won't carry much, if any, weight. it boils down to the better safe than sorry scenario. The citizens of Seal Beach, politicians, contractors, and others involved will have to decide on this one. This is Greg Mossholder. He was here at the beginning of the month, and he came over to the Historical Society to take a look at the red cards, to take a look at the items that we had on display, to make sure that the pictures and other things that he had inherited, if you will, from DWP and given to the Historical Society were still available, and they are. The other thing I would point out is that you have, where the houses are, you had an oil tank that was supposedly demolished in place, and all the liquids were pumped out beforehand. And that's back in '86 or whatever. I would point out that at 5th and Pacific Coast Highway, you have an ARCO site that was operating under newer laws, and petroleum was found under there. And there were houses within the Bridgeport area that were evacuated and people moved out. And the city council voted to dig and haul that site and get the site cleaned up correctly. And so there was a lot of soil that was pulled out, and right now there's a fence around the property, and they're trying to remove the contamination from the ground underneath Bridgeport and underneath the site that's been, the ARCO site that's been demolished. Now, way back in '86, do we know whether those tanks were leaking? And if so, how contaminated is the soil? Unless somebody did soil tests to determine that, you don't know. So if the EIR is approved and the project is approved, then who's responsible? Is the city responsible if contamination is found when you're building homes? Because apparently no soil samples were taken. And in addition, I would support the comments of Mr. Caviola with regard to asbestos. Eventually, there's going to be some probably open space use, and the City Council and the Park and Recreation Commission is going to be building some sort of open space use, whatever it is. The concern I have is, do you want to, without adequate cleanup and soil samples taken to determine what's there, just go ahead and plan for a park without knowing who's going to pay to clean up the site, assuming you find asbestos. Right now, the City Council has voted only to do 6 inches worth of soil tests. And once you start doing things with a park and that kind of thing, what's below 6 inches? You need to dig a bigger hole than 6 inches to plant a tree. So you're going to disturb whatever soil is there to plant any kind of trees. or any kind of shrubs or anything. So the real question is, do you have adequate safeguards in order for the Parks and Recreation Commission to turn around and make some recommendation for some sort of open space use in the open space area that the city is going to get? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anybody else from the audience that would like to ask questions or make comments on the final environmental impact report?
Good evening. My name is Nancy Cradell, and I live in Old Town. Chairman Bocci and fellow EQCB members, this land where the old Department of Water and Power plant is special. It is a jewel for the city of Seal Beach. I call it our legacy property for Seal Beach. We are called the last little beach town, and I feel we are truly a special place. I feel this property deserves the most special treatment also. Many years ago, people from various parts of our city came together to designate this land 70-30 Park Visitor Serving because they recognized it as very special. Many of us wanted all park, but we knew we couldn't have it free. I believe also a group many years ago saw potential for us to be a special gathering place and a place of beauty too. I feel if we develop it correctly, it would enhance our Main Street and our commercial area there. Main Street's hurting right now, and they could use part of our area to be a resort. After hearing about the settlement agreement and the council actions, I became very concerned about our jewel, the legacy property. I couldn't believe that our council would or could sign away our legacy behind closed doors. It is significant that the agreement was signed as a pre-commitment to the proposed project, but the fact that the city signed on to an agreement that would cost them a great deal of money if the project is not approved and requires them to advocate for the project to the Coastal Commission shows the city is likely predisposed to approve this project. The EIR review process is intended to be part of the decision-making process, but not in this case, as a pre-committed settlement was already in place. That is not legal. It is not an exam after the decision has been made. Tara versus West Hollywood, the state Supreme Court set aside that decision that did that. In order to properly examine the proposed project, the city should set aside its prior agreement, which was approved without valid prior environmental review. The city has further pre-committed to the development of a residential development at the project site by including project objectives in the DEIR that would reject any alternatives that does not include residential development. The DEIR states the project objectives were developed by the project applicant in consultation with the city. The city has essentially approved the change in the use of the site from visitor serving to commercial to residential prior to the environmental review by including the project objectives that require residential development. This pre-commitment to a residential project should not be allowed. My second point is the vacating of 7,626 square feet. That is this area where First Street is made more narrow is not allowed either. Excuse me. The city must determine the street is not presently needed for future. It is not obviously not to reduce potential traffic congestion, reduce energy consumption, or reduce growth-inducing impact. The Seal Beach City attorneys, Watson, Dreyfus, and Gershon, lost this case in 1974 in Palos Verdes versus Rolling Hills Estates. They were going to give up a street to Macy's, and they can't do that. Just the same as our city cannot give this property to these developers. That's illegal. And that is what is in this EIR. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anybody else that would like to raise questions or place comments on the final environmental impact report? Anyone else?
Good evening, I'm Bruce Monroe. I'm a resident, and I'm here with the second hat on, which is to explain a conflict which the city faces between two parallel projects that are going on. One called the Local Coastal Program, and the other one called the Review of the Environmental Impact Report for this specific project. Some years ago, the City Council voted to apply for a local coastal program of its own so it wouldn't have to send its applicants for housing or other kinds of development in the city to the state, to Sacramento and the various places where the Coastal Commission meets. And the chairman of that committee is the Coastal Zones chairwoman for the City Council, Ellery Deaton, and the vice chair is Mario, the chair of the Environmental Quality Control Period, and we've been meeting for a year and something, and are making some progress toward becoming independent in these decisions. But one of the things that the group has discussed was other uses for open space and a project consistent with the previous decisions of the city over the years. In that case, commercial visitor serving space at the top of the hill and open space parks at the bottom of the hill, as has been described tonight. I'm here both as a private citizen and as a Sierra Club member who is aware of a number of nonprofits that would like to operate the nonprofit version at the top of the hill rather than see it be more residential. There is a possibility for a commercial, residential, commercial activity at the top of the hill that is ocean-oriented or beach-oriented or marine-oriented as called for in the Coastal Act. But that would be something like a brothel for Navy personnel or merchant seamen or and there's other alternatives, obviously. There could be visitor centers and aquarium outposts and hiking trails and a variety of other things. And I wanted to quote Shakespeare tonight. He says, "Be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them." And Seal Beach is such a geography. We have rivers on both ends of the city. We have two reconstructed or being reconstructed wetlands. We have beaches. We have visitor serving facilities already. And we have more open space than any other city, coastal city, beach town in Southern California. And if the projections of the federal and the international governments for megalopolises suggest that the 30 million people in the Los Angeles basin will grow to 50 million people, and they will want recreation. They'll want a nearby recreational area to go to, a destination other than a commercial residential service, and that possibility is one of them. So I didn't want to I do want to commend you for considering it as thoroughly as you have, and to the workers who have written as extensively as they have. But I remind you that the ultimate decision is going to be made by the Coastal Commission, whose mission is to protect, conserve, restore, and enhance the environment of the coast. And my question is, will this housing conserve, protect, restore, or enhance our environment? And if the question is, well, maybe not, then let's hear about other projects as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers?
Very briefly, Carla Watson, Seal Beach, 47-year resident. We have a long history in Seal Beach of preserving and keeping open space. I myself started with the Greenbelt. We were told that we had to do it economically, we had to put those condos in, and we decided we wouldn't do that. And we continued on with other projects, including the MOA development, and we were told that we would have to use the wetlands and we would have to build 1,600 homes and then more homes, and we chose not to do that. The attractiveness of this city and what I think is an economic bonus for this city is people want to come to a place where people have been protected. We're not a snobby city. We don't have a lot of gated communities. We're a community, I know I taught in the inner city, and the kids came to Seal Beach because they felt protected. This is a jewel, something that I've been involved with for too long, 35 years. And actually the developers have owned this property for some time, and I was hoping that they would do something that would be special for it, but they haven't. So the council may feel like they're bound because there's such a threat by the developers to bankrupt this city. So they are feeling under a threat, but you're not. This is your profile and courage moment. Just like the other board who turned it down 4-1, this is your chance to do the right thing for Seal Beach. Thank you.
I'm Mary Parcell. I'm here on behalf of Eldorado Audubon, which is a local chapter of the National Audubon Society. We've been in existence 43 years, and most of that time we worked on our local wetlands. And there's very little left of our coastal resources. We all know that. I brought this because this is a blow-up of the Los Rios Wetlands Authority map. You can find it on the website. It shows how close this site is to the Los Rios wetlands that are in public ownership, 200 acres after all these long years, maybe 300 more acres to go. We take the California Coastal Act seriously. I think what Bruce Monroe said just now, very true. This is our resources. One of the things I talked about in our letter for this was the species. And I referred to the letter that was submitted by the lawyer, Amy Mittner. And she talked about the horned lark, the northern harrier, and the white-tailed kite. Foraging, to say that it's only good, this report says, it's only important if they nest there, is not true. We don't have very many places for raptors. We do see white-tailed kites on the Los Rios wetlands. We saw 3 this last winter. After not seeing some. I just heard a lecture by one of the experts on the raptors of Orange County. It's important. It's all connected. We're part of the San Gabriel River. And, you know, visitor serving uses, that's what the Coastal Commission favors. The letter in this report from the Coastal Commission states that. The letter from the Coastal Commission states, what about this disking? If the field is disked over and over and over again, where is the local coastal permit for that? You have to get a local coastal permit to do these things. The native plants, the native shrubs, they're not going to be there. Nothing's going to be there if you keep plowing it up every few months or however often a landowner does that, which it sounds like from the information available has been done repeatedly. So, and the hornbark does occur at the Seal Beach National Wildlife Refuge. All three of those species of special concern would likely occur here. A lot of other things would occur here. But this is, as one speaker said, a special place. I went down to the parking lot today. You look over, you see the brown pelicans. You look over to the Alamitos Bay Marina on the other side of the river. You see the great blue herons are nesting there, by the way. They go down into the river to get the nesting material. They fly back over to the Los Cerritos wetlands. They used to go to this place called heron housing, I'm told, by residents. I learned a lot from residents of Seal Beach about what used to be here. Everything's connected to everything else. Also, I noticed in the report that it says it's not wetlands because it's not jurisdictional wetlands. That sounds like the federal designation or description of wetlands. Under the Coastal Act, you only need one of three factors for wetlands. Does water sit on the site for a certain number of times? It can be rain, it can be fresh water. A certain number of days. Is a soil, the type of the correct hydric soil, or the water, or the plants. So that's not answered in this. And the historical photos before there was a DWP plant by the Historical Society, it clearly shows a part of this was wetlands. Also, when you talk about the glare of lights upon the wildlife from Dr. Travis Longcourt and Catherine Rich, and by the way, Dr. Travis Longcourt is the president of Los Angeles Audubon Society. He's a very well-respected teacher, professor at UCLA and USC. You know, it doesn't really go into the details. I haven't really considered that upon there. So I would ask you to consider all these things. And I think the economic engine for visitor-serving uses, that just seems like the right thing for this community. It seems the right thing for the existing businesses. And we, the people, own part of Los Cerritos wetlands now. People paid for the bike path, the improvements on the bike path. If you look at the signage down there at the bottom of the bike path, why couldn't we also have visitor-serving uses that pertain to this area? The beautiful ocean, the marine life, the bird life, all of it. It's all important. So I'm here on behalf of El Dorado Audubon. Our mission is preservation of native birds and their habitat and education of the community and our members. And I would also say, as Audubon California says, birds matter. Birds matter because we're protecting the Earth's biodiversity for the benefit of humanity. It's for our benefit. And if Audubon won't say something for the birds, who will? Who will? So I ask you to today.
Okay, do we have any other commenters or speakers from the public on the final environmental impact report?
Ed Sellich with Bay City Partners. I'd like to just make a few corrections to some of the things you've been told here this evening. First of all, Mr. Caviola gave you some materials, and I haven't seen what he gave you, but I think I pretty much know what's in there. Let me put what he gave you into perspective a little bit here. When you do environmental remediation, it's a staged process. That's why they're called phase 1, phase 2, et cetera, in the environmental studies. He handed you a letter dated in 2000, and you really need to take that into perspective as far as how the environmental remediation was done on this property. The first study was by Gaines and Moore, nationally respected environmental remediation consulting firm. The second study was done by Parsons Engineering, also a well-known and respected engineering firm that does work in this area. Then the 2000 letter was done that he mentions. And because of that, as well as other factors, LADWP engaged Tetra Tech to take it a step further. Tetra Tech took it a step further and verified the cleanup and the remediation of the site. And then Dudek was hired by the city as part of the environmental process to verify all the work of the 3 previous engineering firms. So the property has been remediated. There are mitigation measures that are included in the EIR to deal with any potential unknowns. Anytime you dig up a piece of soil, there's unknowns of one type or another under there. So that's been taken care of through the EIR and remediation measures. His comments on the county records. The county records exist in the form that they've been distributed to the various agencies that the county was responsible at the time. The county doesn't have the records right now because the county health department moved a couple of years ago, and for some reason they destroyed all of their previous records when they moved. Now, looking to the comments made by Mr. Antos, he comments on people that make observations out on the property and old photos and so forth, but in fact the property was done under the supervision of the city when it came to the grading, the cleanup of the tanks. The tanks were cleaned up. They were broken up into pieces. I believe they were broken up into pieces that were a maximum of 6 inches in diameter. This was supervised by the city under a city grading permit and signed off and certified by the city inspectors. So the tanks have all been taken care of in accordance with all the recommendations that were made by these environmental engineering firms and supervised and inspected by the city. Soil borings, if you look through all the reports that were done, the soil borings were done at various depths over the years, down to 11 and 12 feet, I think, and it was up to the engineering firms to determine what the appropriateness of the depth was for what they were trying to determine at the time. So I think this whole issue about the site not being remediated is really a straw issue. It's been properly remediated by all the standards that we have in place today. There's mitigation measures in the EIR to deal with it, and I think that it's a good remediation program and has been adequately addressed in our EIR. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else that would like to comment from the audience? No? Okay. With that, I will close the public comment period on this, and we will go to board questions and comments. Do we have any board members right now that have any comments or questions regarding the final environmental impact report?
Yes, I do. Barbara Barton speaking. Can I ask a staff question? I guess Jerry or Greg Hastings. I'm not sure how this Melrose works into the situation. I've not seen anything about that. I need Jerry or Greg Hastings to maybe enlighten us on that. I'm concerned what's going to happen with this project regarding water, sewers, schools, etc. So maybe you could have the staff get back to us. I don't know how much work is involved, but I feel that's an important issue.
Okay.
Oh, and I'm not done.
Okay.
Okay. I have another thing here on code is 2-259. You know, Ocean Avenue needs to be addressed. It's said that it's not going to be impacted, and it was answered with a one-liner saying that you were happy with the way it was going to be. I can see many problems. I do live on Ocean Avenue, so I'm very concerned. I'm more concerned with the people who live near the project, Central, First, Marina, and Ocean. I don't see anything that's been addressed for the traffic flow and noise. I felt that we've been left out of all this. I think there needs to be more work on it. I realize that they've done a traffic study, but I mean, you can't believe some of the traffic and motorcycles and noise as we get up there, and it's going to be worse. I tell you, people aren't going to just drive in the other streets and not come down Ocean. I mean, every truck, motorcycle is not going to use a proposed route. They're going to be coming down Ocean Avenue, and I feel that's very uncomfortable for everybody who lives up in that area, from First to Main Street, actually. I don't know if the staff could help on that also, or it's the group that is working on this project. I would appreciate more input on that. I'm unhappy with that also. And, can I go on?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
You've got the floor. so-
Okay, thanks, Mario. Also, I'm concerned with the small lot size of this project. I realize that they want to squeeze as many lots on as they can, and we feel we're just overbuilt and so crowded in Old Town, and I know everybody wants to live here, be here, play here, etc. But I feel the lot should be a lot bigger. I mean, if they're going to put homes in there, let's make them beach homes, not beach shacks or rapid hutches. That's just too small. A low density is what I'd like to see if the project goes forth. I don't think we need any more than 20 homes there. If they're going to build beach homes, let's have them be beach homes. And I hope I can get some comment back on that situation. I respect everybody that comes down and is involved, all of you. I mean, we've all lived here, lived with it. We want to keep it as nice as we can. And those are my 3 comments, and I may ask for more time later, but thank you right now.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members with questions or comments regarding the final environmental impact report?
Hi, my name is Marla Smolowitz, and I do have some questions for either the developers or the staff. The draft EIR makes a statement that the northerly 30% of the site was physically and economically infeasible to build a hotel or a visitor site, which we know is what's called for in our area site plan and what it's zoned for. So my question is this: did that analysis include a larger parcel for the hotel? Because the residential proposal has increased its footprint from 30% to 41%. And why could this be accomplished for the residential development, but not analyzed for the visitor serving development? The draft EIR also states that a larger area for the hotel would need to be expanded, and such a scenario would conflict with the policy. But we are conflicting with the policy by lessening the amount of open space for the residential housing. Can anybody answer that for me, if that was done for the hotel as it was done for residential? The question is to the Bay City Partners or staff.
This is the Assistant City Attorney, Stephen Flower. I just would like to clarify, I didn't know if the chair would like us to take all the questions and then provide the answers, or we can take them one at a time, but we haven't answered that.
Take them as they come.
Okay.
Thank you. Does anybody have an answer for me on that?
The alternative looked at a hotel that would be consistent with the requirements of the DWP specific plan, the 1996 version. I didn't look at a larger hotel or the iteration that would be a larger version.
Okay, so to me, that would say that I would then find this not a complete document, because you did for residential housing what you didn't do for what was proposed to be, which is visitor serving or hotel. So that is a big question for me. Then also, they do talk about something called a filter system. Public Works talks about it, and it says that if this project goes forward, that this needs to be implemented to ensure that we don't have metals going into the San Gabriel River. But yet, when you look at page 3-47 in the final EIR, I can't find anything that verifies that we are installing this filter system, so I want that noted. My next issue is that we know the area plan for Seal Beach and the zoning for the DWP site specifies visitor serving uses for the area. This document that we have evaluates the residential development that necessitates us to change our area-specific plan and our zoning plans. I'd like to know if there exists an environmental analysis of the impacts on air traffic and groundwater for the visiting serving center that we're supposed to be doing, so that we can actually compare what are the environmental impacts and mitigation measures between what we were supposed to develop and what we're actually developing. Is that anywhere?
They're discussing the comparative analysis between the proposed project and the 1996 DWP specific plan?
Right.
And that analysis is contained in section 7 of the alternatives, under the alternative, the 1996 DWP specific plan, which provides that comparative analysis for each topical area.
But it doesn't provide it, I don't think, in an equitable manner, because what you ended up doing was changing your residential from 30 to 41, and you don't provide that same analysis for the hotel. So to me, that's an inadequacy in the document. That's the end of my comments.
Okay, any other board members have comments or questions?
Roger Bennett? No comment at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've been doing this over 20 years, and I've seen a lot of environmental impact reports. And this one reads like a legal brief in favor of a specific project. I mean, it really is nothing more than a big defense. It is inadequate in various places. I mean, it just got to the point where I quit going through it after almost reading everything. Some of the comments that and I'm not going to cover other people's comments, I'm just going to take a couple of mine. You completely missed, when I said why isn't PCH 2nd Street intersection should not be included in the traffic analysis? Okay, but what I asked for is 5th and PCH. There's nothing about that in here, there's no response, nothing. So, also the intersections along PCH, level of service A at rush hour in the evening, excuse me, I find that impossible to believe because I live within a block of PCH and I see what goes on at 5th and PCH every day. And it is not level A. There are times when it is level F. Every day. Monday through Friday. And sometimes even during the weekends. When you get sunny, warm weekends here and people from inland flood down to the beach for some coastal coolness and recreation, even on the weekends, it gets very thick on crowded weekends. Good weather does it alone. The real lack of looking at other alternatives really fried me. This community is way too invested in open space to ever let something like this get through. You need to look at different project scenarios that, you know, maybe some of them have something to do with the proposal, which you're looking at here. But when you get so defensive to cover adequacies and saying that, oh yeah, it's law provided here and it's in this appendix there and blah, 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 but you do everything but answer the questions. I find that perplexing. You miss points entirely. You send people around back and forth in this document to look at this and look at that. You go through these motions, and you still don't get an answer. I don't invest my free time into something like this just to have something just be non-homeworked. I mean, if you guys would have done some work and provided more answers, instead of directing everybody here, there, naming all these laws, saying how it's adequate because of this, that, and the other, it's not cutting the mustard. This thing doesn't read well to a person that's not an attorney or an expert. So, therefore, and again, the green fencing, that's another issue. Maybe it's time for the city council to enact a law against these barrier fences. We have 3 of them in Old Town right now. They're blights. There's the DWP property, there's the ARCO station, and then there's Main Street and PCH. There's the old Chevron property there. 3 in Old Town alone, going on months, years, decades. They're blights. We deserve a better Old Town or a better city in general than having a bunch of barrier fences ringing places indefinitely. So that's just a comment that's actually outside the purview of the final environmental impact report. But also, and this is concerning too, that you really didn't look at the biological, historical use of the property before the power plant. There was no language, no discussion. You guys couldn't do your homework and provide some more information? This property is a lot more valuable because of where it's located than the sum total of any construction parts. It's not just a real estate issue. this property is at the mouth of the San Gabriel River, and to put so much deference on one proposal that has a bunch of train car properties. When you look at the map, it's like, people are going to buy these train cars and call them properties? Yeah, it's true it's that way in a lot of Old Town. But that didn't make it good. It made it overcrowded. And we're going to do the same here because we want to fit into the community? Well, come on. You want to fit into the community? Give us something much more environmentally superior as alternatives in your investigations. There just wasn't enough here. So therefore, I'm going to motion that we recommend to the City Council that this document is inadequate on several points, and it needs to be redone to thoroughly investigate, if nothing else, alternative proposals, and to take much more seriously the biological value of just where its geographic location is, vis-a-vis the river, the ocean, the other wetlands in the area, and to start looking at open space as something that is more precious than real estate, because it is. I motion that we recommend to the City Council that this document is inadequate, and I call for a second.
Second, Marla Smolowitz.
We have a motion and a second. I will call for the vote. All in favor of the motion and the second, as is, declaring this document inadequate and making that recommendation to the City Council, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we have a count?
That's 4 in favor,
Okay,
1 nay.
right. Now, we will go to public comments on topics outside the environmental impact report that are appropriate to this board. Are there anybody that would like to speak on environmental issues outside the final environmental impact report?
Mary Parcell from El Dorado Audubon. I'd like to invite people to come out on our monthly walks at Gum Grove Park, 8 o'clock, second Saturday of every month. We've been doing it for years. It's beautiful. We also have walks on the second Wednesday of the month. We go right onto the Los Ritos Wetlands Authority property, second Wednesday of the month at 8 o'clock. That's First and PCH. Turn onto First Street and park off the pavement. And we're glad to talk to anyone, anytime about the wildlife of the whole entire area. We also have walks on the Seal Beach National Wildlife Refuge last Saturday of the month. So there's a lot in Seal Beach. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to tell everybody, actually, I was just there today briefly. Gum Grove Park is in full bloom right now. It's looking better than it ever has. It's just phenomenal. Do yourself a favor, take a little walk there, weather permitting. I understand rain's moving in, so. Any other comments on environmental issues outside the environmental impact report?
Bruce Monroe. I'm going on with my comment about the existing group that is planning the environment in Seal Beach for the next 40 years. It's called the Ad Hoc Local Coastal Program Group. There are 2 representatives from every council district and some at-large members. We meet on the second Tuesday of each month in this room, and any of you that have long-range ideas, it's a 40-year plan for what we will and won't do, keep and change, and what our commitment is to the state, the Coastal Act, the Coastal Zone, and anything that, like the 60 communities up the San Gabriel that are causing water problems on our beach and things of that sort. So it's a very long-term, very broad, and very complex matter, and we would welcome your ideas.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, observing and hearing no one else, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is typically the last Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. here.